Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 10th of August, 2021. All right, everyone, let's jump into it. So, I'm sure you're all well aware by now of the NFT mania that is going on, the JPEG mania, right? Like all the digital collectibles and art that have been selling for ridiculous amounts lately. Past couple of months, really, the mania's kind of really taken off, and people are saying, JPEG saved the bull market and all that sort of stuff. And it's funny, I put out a tweet here saying, because ETH was pumping last night, I said ETH pumping on the news that everyone is stuck in illiquid JPEGs. And obviously, a lot of people are speculating on these things, using their ETH to kind of like buy into them and then sell back back out of them into ETH and things like that. And whenever ETH moves, it's really funny to see. I guess kind of like people being like, oh wow, no, I need to sell my NFT. I need to get back into ETH so that I can ride this ETH pump up. And I see like the activity kind of spike there, and I see like tweets come out, and it's just funny. Like people start making jokes and things like that. But with the NFT stuff right now, I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. I think a lot of it is starting to remind me of like the, I guess, DeFi Summer, the original one last year, and also ICO Mania from 2017, where there's not much originality anymore. A lot of it is just clones. Like a lot of these projects are clones of like CryptoPunks, and a lot of them are clones of like other projects, and really just harping on with the mania, right? Where they're able to get attention and able to kind of like raise money, or at least make money, because there's like a mania around it. And I've seen this play out like plenty of times with different kind of markets. ICOs in 2017, perfect example. But even in DeFi, something with all the food forks, for those of you who were around back then, where people were kind of like forking different kind of protocols or different kind of like things. A lot of them were forking Yearn and basically attaching like a food emoji to it. Like, I mean, there was yam, there was sushi, and then there was like all these others like pasta and like cucumber, whatever. There was all these really low effort clones. And I think that's kind of like what we're seeing play out in the NFT space right now. But there is definitely a difference here where the NFTs actually have like some art attached to them, right? Whether that be like rarity attributes with different kind of like art styles, or, I'm sure you guys have seen like the penguin stuff on Twitter lately, and people start to form an emotional connection to it. So I think even if a lot of these things end up being worth very little once the mania subsides, people are still going to use them and still going to have them like in their gallery or in the metaverse or whatever, and they're still going to have an emotional connection to it. I believe it's just funny how that works with something like NFTs, and how that's very distinctly different to, I guess, like ERC20 tokens and trading in and out of those sorts of things. But at the same time, I've mostly avoided kind of like speculating within the NFT space, because I think that right now it's definitely in a mania. It's definitely very hard to kind of, I guess, I mean, it's easy to flip and make money if you want to do that, if you want to be involved with that. But usually when it's that easy to do it, it means like the end is near of the mania. I mean, I remember thinking back in DeFi Summer, basically you could farm anything and like you'd make a lot of money from doing so because the APY was high. But essentially, I guess like a few days later, the market topped out for DeFi for those kind of like DeFi forks and coins, and we saw like a massive dump happen. And even the like the legit ones, like I think YFI went from like 50k to like 7k in a month. I mean, Aave fell a lot. I mean, a lot of them fell a lot in value, so even they weren't spared by the great like cleansing here. And I remember feeling that same way in 2017, where I mean, I was definitely a noob in 2017, but I was thinking to myself, wow, like I can't lose on these ICOs, right? Like all of them are going 10x from the time that they do the ICO to the time that they're listed on exchanges. And it was actually very different back then, because the only decentralized exchange was Ether Delta. There was no Uniswap or anything like that, and Ether Delta was very slow and clunky, and it was an order book exchange and all this sort of stuff. It was very different, so you had to actually rely on centralized exchanges listing these things for them to kind of pump after the ICO. And what a lot of people did would they would actually start researching, what chance each of these things had of listing on centralized exchanges based on like their VC investors and things like that. So there's a lot of like, there was a science that came out of it, and people were, for a little while making money off of it, but then eventually it topped out because it just got too easy. Like the money was flowing just way too easily. I'm not saying that we're there with NFTs yet, but I'm seeing the same kind of signs. But at the same time, it is distinctly different in that like there's obviously like art attached to it, and a collectible aspect to it, and like an emotional attachment. But I just like, I'm avoiding all of that personally, but I don't blame anyone for wanting to play in that. I mean, it's a good way to stack more ETH if you play it right at the end of the day, because a lot of this stuff is priced in ETH, and you can go on OpenSea, buy and sell, stuff like that. And some of the earliest buyers have made like a lot of money. I mean, if you kind of like go back and look at like the most valuable NFTs, like Autoglyphs, CryptoPunks, Squiggles, even like a lot of these things are worth like a lot more, like 100x more in just a few months than what they were. But I don't expect that to continue, because what ends up happening is that people see that and they're like, oh wow, like I could have made 100x on that. Well, I'm gonna go chase the next best thing, and there's diminishing returns each time that happens, and eventually you reach a point where the new money coming in basically to these things it basically stops completely, or like doesn't outweigh the amount of sell pressure there is and the amount of people wanting to exit, and you have this kind of like crash that happens. So I do think that the NFT space will eventually kind of like come down pretty brutally, because there's never enough exit liquidity for everyone. But I don't, I think some of them have lasting value. I obviously think things like CryptoPunks have lasting value. Autoglyphs, and I don't know about Squiggles. Like, I don't know anything about that project, but like some of these really unique projects that are tied to either like artists or tied to some kind of history or whatever, they're definitely gonna have staying power. And maybe some of these things, like even maybe the Penguin stuff, has staying power. I don't know. It's too hard to tell when there's a mania, because when there's a mania, you get like a false sense of security because everything's going up at once, and you think, I can't lose and whatever, as I've just explained. So, yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about that for today, because I've been seeing people talk about it on Twitter and things like that, and it's been kind of a theme that's been playing out. And actually, on a positive note as well, I actually think it's quite funny that now that 1559 is in, the NFT mania is like so positive for ETH, because it's burning a lot of ETH. I mean, some the top kind of burners of ETH is like OpenSea, Axie Infinity, random NFT projects like every other day, and that's like a positive thing for the entire kind of like ETH holder ecosystem. So I guess it's like a win-win for now. But then when the market inevitably comes down again, sometime in the future, I don't know when that's going to happen. It could go on for another 6 months. Who knows, right? But when it does eventually come down again, I think we're definitely going to see the reverse of what we're seeing now. So maybe just like a warning there. But on the I guess like the other positive note of NFTs, Eric Connor put out an interesting tweet today where he said people are focusing way too much on the price of NFTs and are missing the bigger picture. The real power is that Ethereum can improve art just like it improved finance. The key areas of improvement are fractionalized ownership and near instant price discovery. So we actually discussed this, Eric and I, on the Into the Ether podcast that we recorded today. But like these two things, I think, are something that I've mentioned on the Refuel as well before, where, this fractionalized ownership, this collective ownership that you can have, and I gave the example of the zombie CryptoPunk via PartyBid the other day, is very unique to crypto. And you can't, it's very hard to fractionalize anything, or pretty much impossible to fractionalize a lot of the, I guess, like collectibles and art within, real life, like physical objects. Could you imagine trying to fractionalize a painting, right? How would you do it? Well, you'd have to issue derivatives against that painting. Say you issue 100 shares against it, and then you give 100 shares out to kind of like each person and say, okay, well, you have shared ownership of this thing now. But that is like completely centralized. There is still someone who owns the actual painting. Maybe it's in a vault somewhere and whatever. Like, you don't actually own a piece of it. You own a derivative of it, or like an IOU essentially, based on like a price ticker or whatever. Whereas with fractionalizing NFTs, because it's a digitally kind of like native object, you can actually split it up into 100 different digital pieces without losing the integrity of the original piece, because you can actually piece it together at the end of it, and you can prove this collective ownership with all of these people, and it's actually true ownership. It's not just an IOU, it's not a derivative. So I think that's really cool. And also near instant price discovery, because we have global, fluid, and very liquid NFT markets now, where and NFT marketplaces like OpenSea, where you can get a very quick price discovery for these things, and you can basically appraise your art or appraise your NFT collection very quickly. For something like a physical object, it's much harder. Like, I know, I've sold some of my Pokemon cards in the past, like doubles and things like that. And it's so annoying having to go to some of these online kind of like marketplaces, or go to like eBay or whatever, and kind of like scroll through and look at the prices and say, okay, well, is that a legit price, or is that like something that someone's just come up with? And then there's other kind of like websites, like there's one that's famous called Troll and Toad. I used to go there and look at their prices, but then you think, am I getting like the best value for my money here? Are they underquoting, whatever? And it was just like a much slower and clunkier process. Whereas with NFTs on Ethereum, it's much, much faster for this price discovery. So I think what Eric probably meant to say here was like people focusing on way too much on the speculation of NFTs, whereas focusing on the price discovery aspect of it is definitely very important. And I think this is why NFTs are going to transform art, transform collectibles, transform gaming, just like DeFi has transformed finance. And it really is only the beginning of it. I think we're going to get much bigger from here. But I do kind of like think that we're obviously in like a mania, and I think that there's too many clones right now, not enough innovation. I would love to see more innovation in the NFT space and more iteration on things rather than cloning what, might have succeeded in the past and may not succeed into the future. But that's just how these things go. When the money is easy, you get people coming along, they create new projects, they do new things, and they make the money while they can, but eventually that kind of runs out. So yeah, I just wanted to give a few thoughts around NFTs there. But on that note, I'm going to move on to the next thing here, and this is the infrastructure bill. I think this is the final thing I'll be saying about the infrastructure bill for a little while here. So what ended up happening was they needed a unanimous consent to pass the compromise amendment that you may have seen being talked about on Twitter for this bill. And what unanimous consent means is that all senators needed to basically vote for it. If even one objected, then it would fail, and the original language in the bill would go through. So what ended up happening was that one senator called Richard Shelby objected to the amendment because he didn't get his own amendment for a $50 billion increase in defense funding. So he's against all the others, which is just hilarious because if anything, the US does not need any more defense spending. But anyway, and then unless he changes his mind, that's it. The compromise amendment is dead, and he's also retiring at the end of his term. So I think Chainlink God put it really well here, and I'm not going to rant too much about this, but he basically said, so this is what it really comes down to. One boomer already halfway out the door, screwing over everyone else over something completely unrelated. It's like a pouting child who takes away everyone else's toys because he didn't get the McDonald's toy he wanted. And he continues, why are we letting an 87-year-old politician determine the regulations of a new technology that he has never used or understands, which would have brought trillions of dollars in economic activity to the US? And then he says, wait, he isn't even a boomer. He's from the silent generation, born during the time of the Great Depression, which is just grand irony here. But this, I think I want to harp on about like the age thing here. And I'm not trying to be ageist, but if you're like that old and you really, there's a very high chance you don't know anything about crypto. And I'm not even going to say that's just like if you're old. There's a lot of young people who don't know anything about it. But typically a lot of politicians are really old, and career politicians, and really they tend to lose touch with a lot what's going on with society at large, because they're just sitting in their own ivory tower or whatever. But I didn't want to kind of like harp on about that too much. What I do want to talk about is the fact that I just find it so insane that the people who don't understand crypto are the ones legislating on it, because like, how does that make any sense, right? How can you expect them to legislate something properly when they don't even understand it? And it was funny because Ted Cruz, one of the senators, I think this senator from Texas, basically there's a video of him basically giving a speech where he says, if he asked every senator in the room to stand up and give kind of like a breakdown of what cryptocurrency is, probably less than 5 could. I think it's like 100 senators or something like that. So we basically have 5% of all of the senators being able to give you a breakdown of what crypto is, and the rest of them can't, but they're still voting on it and they're still deciding kind of like what happens in this industry, which is just absolutely insane at the end of the day. So that's kind of where we stand. Unfortunately, the amendment didn't go through. The original language it made it into the bill, which is the crappy language, and that'll be going through to the House now. And as Jerry Bruto says here, the good news is that they're not giving up. Coin Center being them and all the other people working on this, like Jake Javinsky. Next stop is the House, where they can get like a whole new amendment from scratch that can address all of their concerns. So yeah, we're going to have to look out for that and see what happens there with the amendments and things like that. And, there's also these senators that have been kind of fighting for us here. You can see them named here, and also all the people kind of like working at Coin Center and around them as well. So yeah, all hope is not lost. And as I said, this doesn't go into law until 2023. The market definitely is shaking this off and doesn't really care. And I put out my own tweet today where I said, the fact that we got like rugged by this boomer, who's not even a boomer, it turns out, right? But the fact that we got rugged by this person that doesn't understand crypto at all and was just being petty is just frankly ridiculous and insane. And I said, don't fuck with crypto, right? Don't fuck with us, because we're going to hit back. And the way we hit back is we basically work to disrupt all of these institutions that these people hold dear. But like, even though I'm taking kind of like the cynical approach here, the problem is that a lot of these politicians are probably going to be dead by the time crypto takes over. It's still going to be like 5 to 10 years until crypto essentially takes over. And a lot of these politicians are so old that in 5 to 10 years, some of them can be dead. And a lot of them will probably be not lucid enough to realize what's going on. Like, that's how old they are, it's just crazy to me that we don't have age limits on who can be a politician. Like, at a certain age, you kind of like definitely aren't representative of the majority of the population anymore. You probably don't understand what's going on, especially in technology. And I do think there should be age limits there. But maybe that's an unpopular opinion. I don't know. That's just like my personal view on it, and I think that maybe the age limit should be like 60 or 70, and there shouldn't be like minimum ages for being kind of like I don't know if there's a minimum age for being a senator, but there's definitely one for being the president, which I think is kind of like crazy, because at the end of the day, I definitely would probably trust someone in their 30s to be a president rather than someone in their like 70s to actually be in touch with what most of the people want when it comes to these sorts of things, at least, and especially when it comes to like senators regulating I guess like crypto and technology in general. So yeah, I'm not going to rant any more about that. I think that at the moment there's not really much to worry about. We'll see what happens when this final law goes through, but we basically made ourselves known now. We've basically said we are here, we are a force to be reckoned with, we being the crypto ecosystem, and we're going to fight. And that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to be keeping tabs on kind of like how the fight looks, what happens in the House. But for now, this is where we stand on that infrastructure bill. So in more positive news, Mohammed here has updated his watchtheburn.com website to version 2.1. So there are now more stats on the sidebar, and he's cleaned up the units, improved performance for the client and Geth proxy, and a bunch of other improvements. Next up, he'll be including aggregations into his improvements, bringing back the USD price for everyone. Sorry, for all the metrics here, and more charts. Now, I mean, Watch the Burn was one of the original websites that was spun up for watching ETH being burned as part of 1559. There's a bunch of them now. I mean, I've spoken about them before on the Refuel. But generally, like, I love these dashboards. I mean, as I said, I have the Ultrasound Money kind of one down here on my little iPad mini. Kind of like just there all day. I just love going to bed and then waking up and seeing like thousands of more ETH being burned. It's just crazy. And then watching the leaderboard and seeing like how on certain days like OpenSea will be number one and then Uniswap will be number one. And like the leaderboard changes over time, obviously. And some random like new NFT project will be in the top 10. And so it's going to be cool to monitor as well. But yeah, great to see Mohammed keeping up with Watch the Burn here and improving it and adding new features to it as time goes on. So I've been talking about the Altair network upgrade that's coming to ETH2. Well, we now have a date for the Pyrmont testnet to fork to this network upgrade. And this, I think, is the last testnet before it goes to mainnet. So the testnet will fork on the 19th of August at 2021 at Epic 6150. So that's fairly soon, right? 9 days until this happens. And, I think there's already been like a bunch of other dev nets and test nets happen, but this is like the full public, long-standing testnet for ETH2. So this should be really cool to watch and see it go through. But essentially, once that happens, probably have a couple more months until I guess like it goes through on the Beacon chain, and then all eyes on the merge. Really, the merge is the next major upgrade, as I've been talking about a lot. And all the ETH1 and ETH2 developers, once Altair goes through, will be focused on the merge and focused on making sure that goes through without a hitch. Because at the end of the day, if that goes through perfectly, I think. It's funny because I've been talking about like execution risk with regards to Ethereum and how a lot of people considered 1559 to be such a huge upgrade that there was a lot of execution risk and something that, there's a high chance that something would go wrong. But that went well. Like, obviously, we found a consensus bug on the testnet and we fixed that. And then mainnet forked and, it's been all well and good up until now. Fingers crossed nothing happens there. So I think that de-risks Ethereum for a lot of people. And then the merge as well, like being the major upgrade, the one that everyone's like, kind of worried about and kind of like, wow, this is crazy. Like this is an actual like really big deal where you're basically hot swapping out the consensus mechanism and things like that. I think once that happens, there's going to be a pretty big shift in, I guess, like narrative around Ethereum about its execution risk and about its future as well. Like I've said it plenty of times. I can't wait. Proof of stake is almost here for Ethereum as a whole, and I just keep stacking more ETH to just keep adding to my validator stack. Like I just want to, I want to stake up my ETH forever. I want to make sure that I'm part of the network. I want to make sure that I'm securing it. So I just can't wait till I'm actually securing real kind of value, because at the moment all I'm doing is, I guess, securing the Beacon chain itself. I'm not securing any ETH1 transactions or any kind of like network activity, and I can't wait till my validators are doing that. and I can't wait until I'm getting that juicy extra APR from all the fees that aren't being burned as well, which should be really, really cool. Just more of a way to stack more ETH there. So Gearbox Protocol came out of stealth today. I think they've been building for a little while here, but they basically announced themselves today. And essentially what Gearbox allows you to do is get leverage on your favorite DeFi protocol to be able to margin trade on Uniswap or SushiSwap, leverage farm on Yearn, or arbitrage pegged assets on Curve, and so on. And that's what they're building here. So basically it's a generalized leverage protocol as they describe themselves. And they have these concepts of like vaults where kind of like capital can sit and people can like borrow that capital to go do, as they said, like leveraged kind of like Yearn farming or like arbitraging of assets, or leveraged kind of like farming on Uniswap or SushiSwap. And what was really cool about Gearbox is that they're actually born out of ETH Global's Market Make Hackathon, which I think happened last year, if my memory serves me correctly. But this is just another kind of like protocol that's gone on to continue building after one of these Ethereum hackathons, which is just like, I mean, absolutely amazing. I've judged a few of these hackathons. There are some really, really smart people working on projects there, and you know the fact that they continue building them and eventually get them to a point where they probably will raise funding and then get to mainnet and provide a product that a lot of people will use is really, really awesome. So yeah, great to see them kind of like coming out of stealth here and announcing themselves. You can definitely go read the blog post here for a full breakdown of what Gearbox Protocol is, how it works, what their key innovations are here, and what they think I guess like what they think the real value that they're bringing to the ecosystem is. And I really like their kind of like little artwork here. It's like Rick and Morty inspired, right? Where they've got like these kind of like cockpits going on here, this sci-fi Rick and Morty inspired stuff. I really like that. And I love the name Gearbox Protocol too. It's fun. It's like a steampunk sci-fi kind of mix here in their art, which I actually think is pretty important. Like a lot of people don't realize it maybe, but like branding, marketing, and all that sort of stuff is really important, especially in an ecosystem that is obsessed with things like NFTs. Like, could you imagine them NFTing this, for example, like the Gearbox team turning this into an NFT and basically selling it off, and maybe they put that money that they earn into like their protocol treasury or anything, or maybe they use it to pay developers or things like that. So there's lots of stuff you can do here. But yeah, generally just cool to see these. You can go check out this blog post for a full breakdown of what Gearbox Protocol is and maybe how you can get value out of it, when they go live. So Diversify put out an updated Ethereum Layer 2 ecosystem map here with 162 projects on this map. Now you can see they're basically split up into different categories, from infrastructure to lending and borrowing to bridges to side chains to NFTs and gaming, all that sort of stuff here. And I mean, it's funny because you like these charts, I think, are just pure marketing. I don't actually I don't actually think that there's that much signal in them. It really is just like a bunch of logos in a chart, just basically showing the ecosystem. And I've seen like other projects do this, like Cardano had one where they had like a bunch of logos there and no one really knew what it meant or whatever. It just includes like every project, even if the project doesn't have any traction or not. But I still think it's just a great way to visualize like the fact that all these projects are working on layer 2 in some way, or working on getting onto a layer 2, or basically are kind of working on bridges, or working on side chains as well, which is like orthogonal to the layer 2 ecosystem in terms of like scaling. But you can see here in the infrastructure we have like so many now working there. Like I talk about these all the time: Starkware, Mutable X, Aztec, Hermes, Loopring, ZK Sync, Polygon, Connext, Optimism, Arbitrum. I mean, look, like there's heaps there now. I don't have to go through all of them. And then on the other side you have bridges as well, which I've been talking about a lot too. Obviously Connect and Hop and Seller I've been talking about. And then you can break, I mean, some of these are doubling up here. Like infrastructure includes Immutable X, and gaming includes Immutable X as well, because that's focused towards like NFT and gaming. And then you got double ups between like infrastructure with Connext and bridges with Connext. And so it's not, it's obviously not like all unique here, but I still think it's a very, very good way to show like where each project sits within different categories and like how big this ecosystem now has become in terms of scalability. So yeah, great to see this kind of chart put out by Diversify. But as I said, view this as more of a marketing thing and less of like an accuracy thing, because this really doesn't show, I guess, like which projects have traction, which don't, which are legit, which are not legit, all those sorts of things. So yeah, great to see this this kind of like flow chart. Sorry, here, regardless of intent. So speaking of layer 2, Starkware has basically, I think, put a post on the MakerDAO governance forum, or at least a MIP, a Maker Improvement Proposal, to add the StarkNet engineering core unit to Maker, which would essentially get Maker on StarkNet, which is Starkware's generalized kind of like L2 ecosystem here. So Maker is one project that hasn't gone to any L2 yet. They haven't gone to any Optimism or Arbitrum, or at least they haven't confirmed that, but they have been looking into it. There was a post, I think, a few weeks ago, basically discussing the scalability landscape and where Maker should deploy itself. They obviously released the bridge for Optimism, where you could basically have this DAI bridge where you could have instant DAI withdrawals from Optimism to layer 1. So they are definitely involved in that space, but they haven't deployed the Maker system itself to any of these layer 2s just yet. And I think it'd be funny because if they did this, they would have to maintain a DAI supply across like multiple chains, right? They would have to make sure that the DAI in circulation adds up, like all the DAI on Ethereum layer 1, all of it on like Optimism and Arbitrum and everything like that, and it would remain fungible between the two. So I don't know if Maker maybe needs to be on a layer 2 anytime soon. Maybe they can stay on layer 1 and just have DAI on every layer 2, because I mean, obviously Maker's main product is DAI, but on the flip side, its other product is cheap debt. So people like taking out kind of like DAI loans on their kind of like ETH collateral, whatever other collateral and things like that. So, I'm curious to see how Maker plays this. Like if they deploy the Maker protocol to kind of like Optimism or Arbitrum or any of these other layer 2s, like I guess even Starkware and StarkNet, and how they kind of like keep consensus on the DAI supply between all the different chains and things like that. So very curious to see how that goes. But you can read, I guess, like this post here from Lewis from Starkware, who basically goes through like why Maker should consider adding the StarkNet engineering core unit to the protocol here. So definitely go check this out. So speaking of layer 2, DYDX has been exploding in growth lately, and obviously that's because they announced their token the other day, right? The token isn't available just yet. A bunch of people got airdropped the token, and to actually claim that airdrop and to earn your airdrop, you have to do trading on DYDX, which I think is actually a great growth hack there. But essentially, they have this tweet here that since announcing the DYDX token, they basically hit several new records. They have $1.1 billion in weekly volume, $220 million in daily volume, $124 million in open interest, $170 million in total value locked, now number 1 in layer 2s as measured by L2Beat.com, 5k new depositors, and 9k weekly active traders. This is the power of a token, my friends. I've been monitoring DYDX's growth for quite a while. I've mentioned it many times on the Refuel, and they didn't have any kind of like metrics anywhere close to this until they added the token. And I think it's funny that their language here is that since announcing the launch of the DYDX Foundation, they hit new records. I mean, come on, guys. Like, it wasn't because you announced the foundation, it's because you launched the token. But anyway, like, I just, this wording, because of like regulatory stuff, just annoys the crap out of me, even though I know why people do it. It's just like so cringe. Like, I just hate all this stuff, like the careful wording you have to use. But anyway, I get it. I'm not going to rant about that. But essentially, this makes DYDX the, I guess, leader in L2 exchanges by far. $220 million in daily volume is absolutely massive. I mean, Uniswap on Optimism hit like $3.5 million the other day. Now, given Uniswap doesn't have a liquidity mining, it doesn't have like a, I guess, incentive program to get users trading on the platform in order to claim some tokens. But yeah, this is just like way beyond what my expectations were for a token here. But it really does show the power of it. So yeah, I guess kudos to DYDX on this growth. I really love to see the fact that they're growing this quickly, with a token. And as I said, I think it's a really great growth hack because it gets more people using the exchange, more people familiar with like an Ethereum L2 ecosystem, and works to change the narrative too. I haven't seen many people complaining about the high gas fees these days, and I think that those that were complaining about it maybe are ETH holders, and they're like, okay, well, maybe high gas fees are good now because it means more ETH is getting burned, which is it's kind of funny how like that shifts the argument around, where if the people that like hold ETH are getting value out of it, it kind of like outweighs the fact that the gas fees are high. So really little interesting narrative change there that I've been monitoring lately, but maybe that's an aside. But anyway, great to see this growth from DYDX. I hope it continues for them. So Circle, the company behind the USDC stablecoin, has announced they intend to become a full reserve national commercial bank. That's absolutely massive. This is going to be the first digitally, the first digitally native or crypto native kind of like company that has turned itself into a bank, like an actual kind of like a bank, like your JP Morgans and kind of like Goldman Sachs's of the world, which means that Circle is perfectly positioned to be the kind of like, I guess, bank that's a front end into DeFi. Now, I've been talking about this a lot where I said that, DeFi is going to sit in the back. These front ends are going to be either centralized or decentralized that sit in the front and tap into DeFi. But what Circle has here is an absolutely amazing opportunity to essentially be this middleman. Like, yes, we all hate middlemen, but like a lot of people still want to use them. So what they can do is they can set up this bank, take deposits in from customers, and then basically put those deposits into with USDC into DeFi and earn a yield for their customers and offer a higher yield than what the existing banks can do because they are digitally native. They understand the crypto ecosystem. They already have the tools and APIs in place and all the software in place to do this. And they're going to be fully regulated just like any other bank is in the US. So I think this is absolutely massive news. As much as we want to, obviously disrupt all the banks and everything like that with DeFi, I think this actually plays into that because this is not a bank like we know them as a bank. This is going to be a bank that's going to be tapping into DeFi, adding value to the ecosystem, adding liquidity to the ecosystem, and basically adding value to Ethereum at the end of the day, because every transaction they do is going to burn ETH. That's going to add value to ETH as an asset. It's going to increase Ethereum's network effect, increases its on-chain liquidity, and all that sort of stuff. So there's this whole announcement post here from Jeremy Allaire, the CEO of Circle here. You can go read this and check out like what their plans are. And essentially, how they see this playing out. But the way I see it playing out is just like absolutely massive onboarding vehicle for all these people who would probably have never touched DeFi without something like this. Because a lot of people want their handheld at the end of the day. Like for better or worse, people want their handheld, and that's what I think like this Circle Bank will give them. So I'm very interested to see, I guess, like how this plays out going forward and how much growth they see, because they're going to be able to offer like what I guess like Compound Treasury offered, like 4% on your dollars, for example, to like institutional clients. To maybe like normies or whatever you want to call them, to people that haven't touched crypto before, which is much higher than what you can get in a traditional bank. And that's going to force the traditional banks to actually catch up as well. So we're going to see like a flywheel effect here of DeFi just like exploding in growth because of this sort of stuff happening. But anyway, I think I'm going to leave it at that for today. So yeah, thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give that video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.